So, good morning, bonjour,
إذن صباح الخير أو مساء الخير.
salam, and welcome to all of our participants from around the world,
بكل
and in
مشاركينا من
particular our
العالم
friends in
وبالخصوص
in Morocco,
الذين يستمعون إلى الترجمة باللغة العربية في المغرب، وكل أيضا ما يتابعنا من خلال هذا الاتصال اليوم. ونحن نضطر أو نبدأ الجزء الأخير من هذه السلسلة حول مسألة التعليم والتعلم وكيفية الاختبارات. وإذا اسمي ستوارت رايس.
For colleagues and friends, and we'll be talking today about stories from the field. Personal and professional experiences with learning and applying this information. Before we begin, though, I would like to extend gratitude to the U.S. Embassy in Rabat, Mary Lou Fulton Teachers College at Arizona State University, and of course, all of our friends in Morocco for making these webinars happen and so successful. Thank you all for your participation. So we'll begin today by introducing our panelists. So I'd like to first start with Atman, who is a teacher trainer at CRMF Beni Mellal. And Atman, parle-nous un peu de toi, s'il vous plaît. Go ahead, share.
Yes. Alors, je suis très ravi de faire partie de votre table ronde.
I'm very happy to be among the panelists today. This webinar organized by ASU within the project University Design for Learning, especially I'm a trainer at the CRMF in Beni Mellal, this the training center for teachers, regional training center, and I am I'm sorry, but Uthman's voice is not very clear. Sometimes it just fades away. Hello? Uthman's voice has gone.
So merci. Bienvenue. Next, I'd like to introduce Mina, who is a coordinator and teacher of English as foreign language at the high school level. Mina, please let us know a little bit about yourself.
Thank you very much, Stuart. Special thanks to Arizona State University, Mary Lou Teachers College. Special thanks also to the ministry, to the Moroccan Ministry of Education, as well as the American Embassy in Rabat. As you have already mentioned, Stuart, my name is Amina Shlouchi. I am a secondary teacher of English in Zaytoun High School, Meknes. I am also a coordinator of the teachers of English. Recently, I become much interested in digital education. So I've done some self-training as well as some regional, as we say, locally tailored approaches to the integration of technology in teaching. I have prepared to become what the so-called Microsoft innovative expert, educator expert sooner. And thank you so much for this opportunity to be with you on live.
Thank you so much, Amina. A pleasure to have you with us today. Next, I would like to introduce Mohammed, a teacher of music education at the high school level. Mohammed, please share a little bit more with us about yourself.
أهلا وسهلا بالجميع. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أود أولاً
Good morning. Welcome to you all. I would like first to thank the American Embassy in Rabat and the Mary Lou Fulton Teachers College and all who participated or has been participating in the organization of a series of webinars. Mr. Stewart, Rice, Caitlin, Tanya, and all the people who are behind this success and the comfortable presentation of this webinar. I'm Mohammed Saifi, teacher of musical education in the secondary level. I'm also a researcher in the multidisciplinary interdisciplinary didactics. All the things related to music and language. And I really wanted to attend the previous webinars because it has tackled a lot of didactics issues, especially in terms of assessment. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mohammed. Good to have you with us. And finally, Yasmin, a PhD researcher at Mohammed V University and a member of the Faculty of Education Science and part-time lecturer at Hassan II University, English Department and EFL teacher at EMSI. Yasmin, would you share a bit more about yourself?
Yes. Yes. Hello, everyone. I would like to start with thanking the organization committee for these enriched webinar series and for inviting me today to share my field story. As you have heard Mr. Stewart saying, I have a humble experience teaching at both the private and public sector of tertiary education here in Morocco. So I have given some lectures at the Department of English, and also I am an ESP and EFL teacher at the Moroccan Engineering School. I have developed a great interest in issues of assessment, especially online assessment, and as you might have known or experienced since the start of the pandemic, some time ago, e-learning was taught to us as a luxury, and but nowadays it's more of a necessity, and therefore our education system has to adapt and to train staff and students on how to use it. So thank you today. Thank you for inviting me, and happy to be here.
Thank you all. Merci, shukran. We'll get started with our first question for the panel. And perhaps before we begin, I'll just note for all of our viewers who are not in Morocco is that we're working in 3 languages today. So English, French, and Arabic. And so if you are an English speaker, please listen in on the English channel. And my Arabic is non-existent, and je sais un peu de français, so I will be doing my best to ask the questions with my poor French, just to help here as much as I can. And perhaps next year, Mohammed, I'll have enough Arabic to ask you questions directly. So I would like to have us start with Amina, talking a bit about the conversations that you have with your students about assessment. And what I'd like to ask as well is maybe for you first to introduce who are your students and what does assessment mean to you?
Thank you, Stewart. I am teaching students at a public sector, high school students, ranging from the age of 15 till 18, from different linguistic and cultural backgrounds. So the first issue I raise once speaking about assessment with my students is that I try to clarify together with them the purpose of assessment. That is, whether we are dealing with diagnostic assessment, that is to check their prior knowledge, or formative assessment, in other words, to help them or to help each other, especially with the student-centered approach to understand and to check if they understand the input or not yet. And finally, and most importantly, the summative assessment, if they are in front of the final or the summative assessments. So in this way, directly or indirectly, deductively or inductively, they know the purpose of the assessment or the type of assessment under study. Then, of course, we are dealing with human capital, and we should take into consideration the so-called the hierarchy of their needs, from what we call the psychological needs to the self-actualization ones. That is, I respect and I try to promote a sort of mutual understanding among them, especially that's in our classroom environment, you know, those differences, individual differences in terms of knowing the knowledge or the target language. So here, following the student-centered approach, I try to assess them, but I always bear in mind together with my students that there would be an exam, a final exam that they will take in order to move to the next level. And through these sort of assessments, they are preparing themselves for the job market, okay? And all in all, the last point I want to mention here is that most importantly, I listen to my students. I listen them and I track them through using what we call sheet papers. In this case, I concentrate with them and I don't use technology, unfortunately, but I rather use sheets in order to individually listen to them. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And I really appreciate the way in which you mentioned the range of assessment, you know, and the various levels at which we can assess. So I'd like to offer the same question to Atman. Alors, qui êtes-vous étudiant et comment leur parler de l'évaluation?
Oui, alors il faut tout d'abord qu'on commence
Well,
pour bien comprendre
in order to understand, we are working in training centers that prepare teachers. We are not a general university center. We are training persons to have competencies and the skills, professional skills in terms of discipline and the teaching skills. Disciplines, by disciplines, I mean mathematics, French, and the pedagogical skills, which are planification, management, and evaluation or assessment. In order to convey messages, we talk about two types of assessment. One part is related to the discipline and assess the modules, and the second is concerned with the module itself. So we should the assessment for the trainees is done at three levels: diagnosis, assessment, summative, formative, and summative levels. And my work is based on practice. I give them some works to do, some presentations to make, and in order to make them or for them to be aware of how to deliver lessons. In the formative assessment, we try to do it in a written form, of course, while also speaking about some situational issues, and this will help them develop the skills, the professional skills for the trainees. At each time, after this small discussion, we go to the way of assessment. Excuse me, Stuart, this is a translation. Mr. Othman's connection is very, I think, very poor. That's why we have some problems with the sound each time. So if I'm losing something, it's not my fault.
So, merci, Othman, pour votre français. And I was just listening to a statement from Rashid. So thank you, Rashid. Again, as Mina said and Othman said, assessment, evaluation, pour travail, pour la vie, this idea that we are assessing not just for skills, but also for life. And I think also the idea that we're thinking about assessment in different ways for different contexts and different needs. So important, très important pour les étudiantes et pour les futurs. Mohammed, would you share with us who your students are and how you talk about them, how you talk with them about evaluation, particularly in the areas that you're teaching, such as music?
نعم، بالنسبة لمادة التربية الموسيقية أولا لها يعني
Well,
خصوصيات.
for music, it has some specificities. And among the specificities that we use instruments and we use singing, a voice. And in the musical education at school is different from this education in specialized institutes of music. At school, the pupils or students are given just some tools or mechanisms to understand what is music and some tools to be art critics, because at the end of the day, they should be able to be critics at some level and make them build what we call a musical culture. When I talk to my students about assessments, I generally talk about two forms of assessment. The first one is about the knowledge they have acquired about music, about some musical pieces. And the second level is the practice and how to perform, whether it is by playing on instruments or by singing. And as I will be maybe mentioning afterwards, we start by diagnosis, formative assessment, and then we end by a summative or an end of the year assessment, which takes the form of a performance before a public and not only in the classroom in front of the peers in small groups.
Thank you, Mohammed, for sharing that. Shukran. Yasmin, I'm wondering, as we, if you could reflect not only on this answer for yourself, but some of the things that you're understanding and learning from the answers that your fellow panelists have offered.
Yes. So I would also like to comment on the question from my personal perspective, right? As you know, I deal with students from different backgrounds, and I've also dealt with large class sizes and small class sizes. And so the assessment I'm opting for is mainly conducted online, as most of the time we don't have access to students because of the pandemic, right? And so as we're experiencing this sudden shift to online teaching, online assessment has become more relevant than ever. And especially right now that there's no guarantee that the students tuning in from home are going to be diligently listening to the lecture. And there's no school policy in my case that asks students to activate their cameras. So some of my students might be surfing online or getting distracted by social media. So there's really no guarantee that there's need to assess where they're at with the content. And online assessment for me is the only yardstick that I can use to measure their mastery of the skills and topics. Now, we can't really ignore that some of the students are skeptical about online assessment and do not comprehend the need of it, especially that assessment to them when conducted online is to MCQs to multiple notice that this attitude is often linked with concerns regarding technological incompetence in the technology infrastructure. Now, what I do is at the start of every, I inform my students about how they're going, how their work is going to be evaluated throughout the course. I also explain to them the purpose, like Amina does, the purpose behind each assessment and why we're going to opt for formative or summative assessment for certain content. Because I mainly believe that students are far more engaged and productive when they understand the why and how. This is my comment. And
Thank you for that. And I would just like to take a moment to thank all of the presenters for their perspective on this question. I think that what we're able to hear in this is the commonalities and also the range of assessment for different types of students and different types of contexts. But one of the commonalities, perhaps, for me is that there is always this balance between preparation and performance, that there is a time for students to gather their understanding and confidence around material and then to demonstrate what they have learned, or what we've been talking about using the words formative, right? The sort of ongoing interim assessment and the summative assessment or summative assessment. What I'd like to do is actually take then our next question as an opportunity to talk more about this. And I'm wondering if, Mohammed, we could start with you sharing a bit and expanding a bit on the types of assessments that you're doing on an ongoing basis with your students in music education.
نعم إذا بالنسبة لمادة التربية الموسيقية.
Well, for musical education, we need to make a pre-diagnosis of their knowledge in terms of music. Sometimes you find that some students have never received any musical education before, and this means that we try to start from their given level. If they have never been to this kind of courses, we start just from zero. And if we have some with some knowledge, we start with them on that level. And let me just give you an example. For example, when we are talking about a rhythm, musical rhythm, for example, we start by giving a description of this rhythm, And the best thing is to make them listen to that rhythm. Of course, it should be simple and not complicated. And then I'll ask each one of them to perform that rhythm. Those who manage to do that, so we put them aside, but those who can't, we start with them from scratch. We teach them how to do, how to have this musical pulse, and also other things related to the ability to listening. Students should be aware of the musical rhythms from the simplest of level to the most complicated levels. Because, as I said, we should start by the senses, listening, watching, or seeing, and touching. So all these senses should be engaged, and we, of course, proceed step by step and see whether there are some mistakes that should be prevented, that should be corrected, and we try to make the student enthusiastic about what they're learning in order to master the rhythms that we are teaching to them. And as I said, we start from the less complicated to the more complicated, and then we move from individual to collective work.
Thank you. Shukran so much for that. And I think one thing that I'm hearing, right, is the awareness of prior knowledge, whether they have some knowledge that they're bringing or whether it's completely fresh. And in particular, with working with adult learners, they often have or bring with them a lot of prior knowledge. So I'm wondering, I'd like to direct this question to Atman, is as we think about these assessments, evaluation, how does prior knowledge, connaissance, que les étudiants ont, play a role? How does prior knowledge play a role in your work?
Oui, alors c'est très requis que les stagiaires.
Yes, it is something which is asked from the trainees to describe their level of pre-knowledge. The first class, the first contact with the group is about this special issue about the pre-knowledge. And now we have small groups. In these pandemics, we are proceeding by small groups. And in my first session and the contact session, we try to ask them about what they know first. And I try to make them perform orally, and this gives me an idea about the skills and abilities, especially communication abilities of trainees. I really push towards this type of communication, and then I divide the trainees into groups of pre-knowledge. And then at the end of the session, I proceed with small tests to give me an idea about their skills. For formative or summative assessments, we can say that at our regional training center, we 25% of the global mark is from formative assessments. So the trainer has to choose the type of assessment to be put into this category. In disciplines or in subjects, I prefer to group work, 3-4 persons who work together, and their work is presented before the public or their colleagues for the other skills, planification, evaluation, and management. I try to proceed by hands-on activities. We work on writing of documents, according, of course, to the curricula. And also for management, we proceed by writing some scenarios of management and then discuss them in groups in order to see how we can come out with the best methods and best practices in our professional performance. And we can take, for example, a reference framework. For example, we have the 2021 reference framework, which has been prepared at the provincial or regional level. And then in the exams, I remind them of the workshops, and for each workshop, they can get specific exams.
Merci, merci Antoine. One of the things you said at the beginning about oral evaluation orale, seems to be very important, very useful, très utile, because students may find that, and we've talked about this in other webinars, that some students perform really well orally. They're very comfortable with talking, but not very comfortable with writing, right? And so meeting students where they are. One of the questions, and I think that this is relevant, very relevant to our current discussion, and Amina, I'm wondering if you could share some thoughts, which is how assessment is often can be viewed negatively. Students might have a negative impression of assessment. And so how do you make the assessment process, the formative assessment process, friendlier for students?
Yes, thank you, Stuart. Yes, a very existential question when it comes to how do students think of assessments. And the best solution here is for both the teachers and the learners to think of assessing our learners in what is called the non-punitive way. That is, as there is a saying, the world is already full of critics, so try to be an encourager. So as teachers, and as you know, we are assisting our future generations to be better than the present one and than us, of course. So here we should encourage the student to approach assessing simply as, how can I express it, as to move from A to B. I'm going to assess you, especially the summative way, only to know if you already got the meaning or the objectives or the competencies of the lesson, or are we going to pause for a moment and think of a remedial work? So I think this is one of the suggestions or one of the pieces of advice we should follow in order to encourage the student and to minimize the anxiety atmosphere on the part of both the learner and the teacher.
Thank you so much. I think that's very well put. And I love that phrase, the world is already full of critics. Mohammed, I would like to ask you a question, just as someone who's fascinated with things like music and art, but don't feel myself to be very good at them. And so I'm wondering how you might speak to developing confidence in your students so that they're quieting down the critic and able to express themselves or have confidence in themselves.
في الحقيقة
Well, in fact, assessments take place. Well, I don't like the term exam or evaluation. I don't tell them that this is an exam. I tell them something like, let us perform before the others. Each one of you will perform. And I know that the subject that are very that the students love is music at school, because they find themselves in a space of entertainment and of fun. They really they try to enjoy the session, because singing is something enjoyable. Everybody loves singing, I guess. Young people and adult people love singing. So yeah, in fact, it is an assessment, but I call it a performance. And especially for teenagers, sometimes they are too shy, for example, to perform before their colleagues. But by my encouragement and by the encouragement of other colleagues, we try to make the students overcome those obstacles and try to share with others his skills or her skills. And generally, we proceed by small groups. The assessment is never individual unless there are some cases of individuals who want to show their abilities and skills in singing or in music in general. So we try all the solutions available in order to make students perform before the others. So the assessment here is another lesson. So for us, the assessment is also another way of learning, because the student learns how to face a public and how to overcome his phobia problems, especially what we call the track problems on stage. And we try to make them enjoy the session and make the others enjoy their performance in a atmosphere of fun.
Mm. Thank you. Thank you so much for that, Shukran, because I think this also speaks to something we've discussed before in these webinars, right? Which is that we can learn so much from our colleagues in other disciplines, in other subjects, in other areas. And that even though our discipline may have a historical form of assessment, that doesn't mean we can't take ideas from other areas and think about how do we make engineering more like a musical performance, right? How do we engage in different ways of thinking about assessment? Yasmin, because in the previous question you talked a bit about your experience with online education and assessment, I'm wondering if you could talk a bit about formative assessments and in the online environment and in perhaps large class online environments.
Yes, thank you. So I definitely have some tools that I started using. Online assessment became the main mode of assessing students, especially at the Department of English. Students person Taiwan, and unfortunately they don't have access nowadays. And so what I use in my classes is there's a podcast platform called Synth, and I think Tanya or Caitlin can share the link to this website. And what it does is that you can create a channel on that platform and start a thread. You can start a thread, or your students can, as soon as you share the access code with them. And so when dealing with a course like cultural studies, where they're introduced to multiple theories, from psychoanalysis to critical theory to feminism, etc., really interesting theories, and they have a question, or they used a voice record message, and to which students and myself can react to by either writing via text or recording another voice record. They can also tag each other or tag me. And I think what this does is that it enables me to assess where they are in the topic, how much they've learned, how much they've learned from my lecture. And it also starts interesting discussions that go beyond the structure of my course. And I find it really, really interesting. This is one type of formative assessment that I use and that I've enjoying so far. There's also something that you before, which is similar to a method called the KWL, which is what I know, what I wonder or would like to know, and what I've learned. And I use the on either Teams, or you can use one on the online website Miro, and you can create a form of the charts divided by 3 grids. The first one is for students to fill in what they know. The second one is for them to fill in what they want to know in the upcoming sessions. And the last one is for what they've learned. So this is another way to assess just what they could take or grasp your lecture or course, but also what they're interested in knowing. And as you said, young adults do come with previous knowledge, so it's actually very, very good to take that into consideration.
Thank you very much for that, and thank you everyone for your responses. Continuing just a little bit more with this thread of size, one of the questions from one of our participants, which Atman, I'd love for you to comment on, which is one of our participants writes, vous ne pensez pas que le facteur du nombre des élèves est décisif pour l'apprentissage? Could you talk a bit about the number of students and how it affects assessment and learning?
Oui, oui, j'ai déjà lu la question. Merci Stewart, merci Rachid. Pour répondre à la question,
Thank you, Stuart. I have already read that question. We have now about 200 trainees, and they are divided up into 10 groups. We have also subgroups. We have groups of 20 and then subgroups of 10. And this, of course, what is not good really for training is that the 30-hour course for each module is divided by 2, because we have only small groups now with the context. And yes, I confirm that we are doing with the hourly duration that we have in order to convey all the professional skills needed for our trainees. In this pandemic's context, we are really fortunate. Let me say that we are fortunate to have 15 hours hourly volume. Because last year we worked all the year remotely, and it was really very tough, very difficult for everybody, for students and for teachers. And that were what at the end of the day was very negative in terms of assessment. This year we have at least 15 hours, and this will help us, of course, make better assessments.
Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup for your thoughts on that. What I'd like to turn our panel's attention to is our next planned question, which is around student motivation and what steps that our panelists have taken regarding student motivation. And Amina, I'm wondering if you could start with your reflections on sustaining student motivation and what that's looked like for the last year, let's say, and maybe what your experience was before we went to largely remote learning.
With great pleasure, Stuart. To reflect on this question, and in our Moroccan environment as well as elsewhere, when we think about motivation, we think about the dichotomy of whether it is a proximate education or a distance one, and whether the tool used is a sort of electronic technology or a digital one. So according to my modest experience, I experienced both. I had the honor to register or to record few lessons for the provincial directorate here in Meknes for TV. And I also experienced the digital education through a bunch of humble tools, namely WhatsApp and Teams. Why Teams? Because why not Teams? Because at the beginning of the eruption of COVID-19, let's say it directly and honestly, we as teachers, I'm speaking about myself, I didn't know much about technology, just simple use of some applications such as WhatsApp, etc. But then there was a push towards professional and self-training on the part of the teachers, then an encouragement on the part of the students to use technology. Okay, so coming back to the dichotomy, then we have in mind that there is the student who is in the urban area and the one in the rural area. So TV and radio mainly for the rural ones, and just a little bit use of the digital one in the cities. Because you know that internet connection is an obstacle everywhere, of course, not just here in Morocco, and we really appreciate the efforts done by our officials in this way, and we hope for more encouragement. So here, yeah, and to motivate students, the students can be motivated simply by both using proximate education and distance education. I mention here both because I'm a little experienced in the second one. So the students need some praise and some rewards, such as meaningful feedback, mentioning names, added marks from time to time, simple clap by the hand, yeah, means a lot to a student, okay? So we can say that a teacher or any professional in the area of education can be a positive positive pillar in any student's life. And from that motivation, we can have a generation that can substitute our places with much better futures than ours. And that's my comment on that.
Thank you very much, Amina. And I would like to just, take that and hand it to Yasmin, who was nodding the whole time. And just, Yasmin, what additions might you have to what Amina has shared?
I mean, beautiful intervention by Amina, and I completely relate to everything she said. I've personally noticed that my students, what they're looking for the entire semester is acknowledgement, is feeling, getting that value from us students. And I also realized that our profession comes with great power that very often we miss on. We have that power to inspire, to motivate, to change people's lives, and to foster critical thinking in our students. And if we are able to capitalize on that tool, we can really do something great, not just with our students' professional lives, but also their personal. Now, when it comes to my personal intake as to what I do to motivate my students, content-wise, and I noticed that there are some people in the chat, some fellow professors that teach a similar subject, which is cultural studies. What we started doing with the start of the pandemic is, instead of assigning them text to analyze through the lens of critical race theory or any other theory, is instead of presenting them with text, I present them with movies or ads or something that they would feel is fun to them and relatable to them. So I remember this one time, and I noticed that everybody in my class, and we're talking about a class size of 250, and I had 2 classes to teach cultural studies, and that was a total of 500. Out of that number, I had more than 350 people do the assignment, and I assigned them the movie The Joker to analyze from psychoanalytic theory, and then I gave them another comic book, which is Wonder Woman, to also analyze from that lens of the theory. And I noticed that people were enjoying it, and they wrote so much more than they usually do. And I personally saw the impact of going out of what is traditionally considered as what you should be teaching, this is how you should be doing it, to stepping out of that comfort zone and being more creative, allowing yourself as a teacher to experiment with different techniques and methods. So yeah, that's my personal intake. And also I would like to add that when you're teaching online, it is very important that you pay attention to teaching styles and that you cater for them. If you only send your students, sorry, PPTs, as the mode of instruction, or you only conducting, lectures and not providing them with different modes of content, I think you might not be catering for all learning styles. Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for that. Atman, I'm wondering how in your work do you recognize student achievement? I don't really know the French for this, but how do you recognize a reward students to keep them going, if that makes sense?
Oui, alors la question de la motivation est une question assez épineuse.
The question of incentives is very important, or motivation is very important. In our regional training center, we really are aware that the trainee is in a transition phase from being a student to being a professional or a teacher. So in this passage year or years, we need, of course, to see this question of motivation very seriously. For me, it takes two forms: motivation by rewards. Uh, Rewards, this means that he will be a very good teacher, he will develop skills and then be paid accordingly. And the second part is about the ethical issue. I tell them this is a profession, a noble profession, very respectful, even if the salary is not very high, but it's about personal satisfaction. Uh, uh, the teacher is self-satisfied about his or her performance. Let me give an example. Now I'm training teachers for uh, for primary school. The only motivation I found is that I try to is the fact that these teachers, I tell them, you are going to move small children from ignorance to uh, education, to learning. So this means that you, as a person, you are going to shed some light for those small children because they don't know nothing about reading or writing. So it's up to you to learn how to read and write, and this is something very important in their life. So this work will make you self-satisfied about yourself because you will see the consequence, the result of your work directly on those children. So that's why we give more importance to the practical and pragmatical aspect of teaching. When you see that a child knows at the end of the year knows how to write and read, this is a self-satisfaction for a teacher.
Thank you. Thank you. Merci infiniment for those thoughts. That is so very true. And I think one of the things that you're also drawing out for us is that motivation is really also self-reflection, right? That we must take time to see where we have been, where we are, and where we will go. And that has a tremendous value and impact on the student's desire to continue to move forward and continue to grow, whether they're a child or an adult. And I think that's a good connection point. And Mohammed, I would love for you to start us off thinking about how do you use the assessments you're doing with your students, the student performances, to think about your own teaching practice.
نعم سؤال جميل.
Yeah, very nice, very nice question. I try to start generally by speaking about the performances that will be made by the learners and try to tell them that it will be really the fruit of our work. The efforts are given by the learners, framed by the teacher. In this scheme, the teacher is, let's say, a mediator, a facilitator who tries to bring good results. And then when we arrive to the assessment, we are looking for some results that make the teacher aware and satisfied about the efforts made throughout the year. of course, with the learners. It is the let's say it's a feedback uh, um, from of all the things I have as a teacher given to those learners. Uh, uh, and this is for me a reflection, it's a mirror, so I can see myself in that mirror. So if I fail, it's my fault, it's the fault of my methodology and the way I work, the way I build those skills in those students. Maybe I can ask the question about, have I started from the required level or not? So for the assessment, so in Arabic, assessment, it's like another word in Arabic, which is evaluation. So, and or also it can refer to adjustment. So the assessment for me should be a way to adjust the things that are not going well. And at each level, we need to see what are the failures and what are the gaps to be filled.
Shukran, thank you. And I love this word, adjustment. Amina, I'm going to use this phrase, the world is full of critics, and Mohammed, I'm going to use this word adjustment a lot more now. And I'm wondering, Amina, if you could continue the thread that Mohammed has kind of started with, this idea of adjusting, right? Of responding to what is happening in the moment and improving, in some sense, improving gradually over time, right? Constantly growing.
With great pleasure, Stewart. And thank you, my colleague, Si Mohammed, for mentioning the adjustment. It reminds me of another terminology related to the 21st century learning design skills. Either we call it adjustment or self-regulation. They are 6 pillars of that those skills, and they are also it is referred to as self-regulation. So here, when we speak about adjustment, we speak about adjustment on the part of both the learners and the teacher. So I'm speaking this way not because I am appointed as a teacher yesterday, but this is year number 19. At the beginning, I was tabula rasa. I didn't know much about the surrounding, about how to deal with the classroom management. And I developed, as we say, I developed my competencies with time, with asking questions, with listening to my inspectors, discussing and sharing things with my colleagues, listening to my students and listening to their feedbacks. Sometimes in order to promote or to get into this stage of adjustment, I used, for example, to ask them to provide me with the anonymous feedback in order not for them to be embarrassed and for me to promote, to develop myself. So here, self-regulation is a lifelong process. And if we manage to develop only this skill on the part of the students nowadays, we are going to be assured that the student will have his or her own path, a successful path that we will all be proud of. Yeah, sorry, and thank you.
Thank you so much for continuing that thread. And to Atman. Can you talk a bit about this? Tu peux parler de cette idée, adjustment.
Oui, alors l'évaluation ici, pour l'évaluation qui se fait au niveau de la pratique, de ma propre pratique, c'est une évaluation qui...
So for me, evaluation it follows the paradigm of practice, theory, practice, theory. How to start with a practical exercise to go and come out with a theory, and also see what are the approaches, pedagogical approaches, and then go back to practice in order to adjust and to make things better and to have an added value. And it's across this paradigm that I try to initiate them to the profession of teaching, and also just to know how to evaluate. In my work in this center, I try to modify and change my practices in terms of assessment on the light of what I receive as feedback from my trainees and from my colleagues on the level of summative or formative assessments, knowing that for the summative is written. In formative, we have the choice between written or oral by presentations, exposés, etc. For us, the assessment is something that gives us the opportunity to review our ways of assessment each time. And we try to be very responsive to the critics or to the comments. And even for assessments that have nothing to do with the discipline, or where the students is asked to give us some reflections on his or her way of understanding the management and the pedagogical skills. In this summative assessment, which is written, I try to give them some situations to write on. And I try to make them read other books and give me a synthesis of what they understand. And this makes the trainee in a situation, a professional situation, where he has to look for information, look for thoughts in order to convey them to the students. And this, of course, follow an approach that is in line with the assessment intended.
Thank you very much, merci beaucoup. And finally, Yasmin, your thoughts on this quality of self-reflection and the use of student assessments to reflect on one's own practice as an educator.
I first of all would like to mention that different we can benefit from summative assessments versus formative ones. And I think personally, I benefit way more from formative assessment because in the case of summative ones, students take them at the end of the year when most instructional activities are near completion. And second, by the time I have the results, access to those students. So low stakes and formative assessments, I will the most from to improve my instruction and modify my approach. And by capitalizing on that data, it really helps me to identify what I thought well and where I need to work on, adjust, like you said, the density and level of my materials. There are many times where I personally assigned materials that were adequate to the level harder, or yeah, I pay attention, special attention to trouble spots, items or criteria number if my students have missed. And I also reflect on that I use. I try to see whether the items I used adequately address the knowledge, understanding, or skill there. I recall student because I was not a long time a student myself. I remember that were not really and that as a student I found hard to answer. The content of the course not so yeah, that is something to pay. And most importantly, I feel like for the reflection process to be efficient, you have to set aside your powerful ego issues as a teacher, because most of the time we would be like, if the results are disappointing, we'd be like, oh, I taught them this, or they're the ones at fault. Or it's really important not to take it personally and to set aside your ego. Your question.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that that comment about putting aside ego. It seems to be a really wonderful theme. And also, I think, Mohammed, when you said that the student's performance is a mirror, right? So that we see our own abilities to reach students, and that can prompt us to think about our teaching and to try to work harder, right, to be able to reach more and more students of differing abilities, of differing backgrounds, however we want to think about that. Yasmin, I'd like to have you start with our last prepared question, which is about assessment data and colleagues. So one of the things that we've touched on throughout this webinar series is that each individual teacher, each individual professor can use assessment information to support their own students and their own teaching. But what does this look like when we think about the department level or the school or university level? What does it mean to use assessment data as a way to coordinate between yourself and other colleagues that you work with?
Yeah, thank you for this interesting question. I think I personally experienced this at the Department of English more than, as a teacher at PFL and ESP. So in our staff meetings at the faculty, we and we do this in order to reflect on our practices and ultimately suggest effective and targeted interventions. And a concrete example of use assessment data to collaborate with other colleagues is, for example, let's say I'm teaching studies. Who teach grammar and composition. And these essays can give them an idea about what skills and techniques are the question.
Thank you very much. And Yasmin, I will probably come back to you just because I think we had a little bit of a sound challenge, which is no problem, but we'll come back because I want to make sure that we can talk a bit more about the things that you shared. Atman, I'm wondering if you could share with us the way that you're using assessment data to talk with colleagues in teacher preparation.
This question is addressed to me, right?
To Atman.
Okay.
Thank you.
Oui. Alors le travail sur l'évaluation se fait.
Well, we work on in assessments upstream and downstream. Upstream, we are in a school of teachers, and we, of course, we make hold some meetings about what can we give in assessment, what are the essential elements or items that should be in an assessment. And we also coordinate with other regional centers in Morocco. And we try to do some coordination. And this, of course, is done collectively with the colleagues. And then we try to work on the results of this coordination and to adjust what needs to be adjusted in terms of formulation of exams or assessments and the marks. Why? In order to achieve something very important, which is the recruitment of the trainees upon the level of their marks. So if they have better marks, they can choose the places they want to go to. So that's why correction of exams should be normalized and unified. This work, this collective work, will of course make teachers coordinate, but also think collectively about some qualities that should be required in the trainings. And this should be similar to all trainings. Thank you. Sorry, Stuart, the sound is very poor, but well, I tried my best.
No, thank you, Atman. Thank you, Rashid. Mohammed, I'm wondering if you could talk to us a bit about how this works for you in your context. And in particular, I'm wondering if you can also talk about the ways that you coordinate with colleagues more generally across the school environment, perhaps not just your fellow teachers of music, if there are them, but also how you coordinate across multiple teachers or classrooms.
نعم جيد. أولاً بالنسبة للتربية الموسيقية ستجد.
Well, for music, we generally found one teacher of music in the whole institution. So I am the king in terms of music in that institution. Generally, but in my relationship with colleagues, I'm very close to the teachers of languages, especially that I really love languages, and I do coordinate and cooperate with them in their work. And I would like to speak about my experience in a special center for arts, and I could coordinate with the teacher of English, and our courses together, both of us, we present joint courses. It's an unconventional fashion, teaching English by some instrumental, with using some instruments, musical instruments. For example, we can take some English songs, American songs, or French songs, and the teacher would explain the words, and we would let the students sing in order to correct the way they pronounce words. And also we work on their reception of sounds. This is an education on sound. So music can serve in language learning, especially that I am myself a singer, and I have already have a portfolio, because I'm a member of the choral group, and I can sing in many languages. You know that singers all over the world can sing in languages they don't speak. I have sung in some languages that are not really known, like Swahili, English, Russian, Spanish, and other exotic languages also. So what I would like to do is to coordinate with the language teachers. I also love mathematics and science disciplines because there are something that can be used in music from mathematics and from science. For example, in anatomy, we can, for example, mention something related to the anatomy, human anatomy, that help in singing and in playing. And during the performances, or the end of the year performance, I coordinate the event as a whole, and I would invite all the teachers and tell them to help me in some questions or issues related to the decoration, to garments, and we try to be all together in one event that celebrates the end of the year. And generally, things really happen very happily and with fun.
Thank you so much, Shukran. I've never been sung to by a king, but inshallah, I will get to hear you sing to me at some point. So thank you so much. Amina, I would like to give you a bit of time as we come close to the end of our webinar to share a bit about your own final project and the things that, and your work with some of these technology platforms that you're familiar with.
Yeah, sure, Stuart. It's my pleasure to do so. Let me just, can I share? Share my screen?
Yes, you should be able to share your screen.
Yes, thank you very much. So, okay.
شكرا رشيد، شكرا. أنت في المستوى.
Is it shared, Stuart?
It is. It's coming up.
Yes, thank you very much.
We see Kahoot on our screen now.
Yes, Kahoot. I mentioned before in my reflection that I will speak about Kahoot. So it is an application that I recently opted for with my students. So just till now, just a few uses of it. I think this is the second after the experimental one. So they seem to be happy and to enjoy it. I did a demo lesson with them in the classroom, and they enjoyed it, and their feedback was that it is entertaining and at the same time informing. Another application I tried is, we just try to is Padlet, to speak about it. Padlet, exactly. So they are supposed to write the words with silent letters, because how to pronounce words with silent letters was the title of my final project I did as partial fulfillment of the training I'm going to achieve or to finish by the end of May. So as you can see here, they could remember a lot of words, okay, related to different words with the silent letters. I also used with my learners, students, a Jamboard. I encouraged them to log in Google Classroom, and many thanks to them for helping me. They partially helped me to do so, okay? And this is an example of one of the students' first baccalaureate, BIOF, what we call specialized in science experimental science option of French. And they are good at languages, of course. Now I move to my modest and humble projects I did. And I hope that it will work because, as I say to you, the name of the application will be sort of surprise, and it is called the Mediator. Most of you know it, of course. So, as a beginner, it took from me a lot of time to prepare my project. Thankfully, our friend, is it shared, Stuart? Is it shared?
I think that it might be in another window, and so you might have to share a different browser window. We're still seeing your web browser, if that's what we should be looking at.
Yeah, but actually, this is the first page of my project. The title is Phonetics, how to pronounce words with silent letters. Is it visible?
We're seeing the Jamboard saying use the following words to write your own sentences.
Yeah, maybe it is not shared.
No worries. If you click the share screen again, you might choose just a different window.
Yeah, I will try again. Yes. Here it is. I hope it will work. Please reassure me. Stuart, is it visible?
Yes.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so this is the project, the modest project I did using the application of Mediator. So let's come back to the first, I'm sorry. I don't know why it stopped. Bear me for a few minutes. I don't think why it disappeared. Oh my God, it disappeared from my main menu here. So
technology is never easy.
Yes, exactly. Especially with this application, I did a lot of ways in order to download it and to share it. So I hope it will work. Is it visible, Stuart?
So it may be on your end, but just click share screen again, and then share the screen on your computer that has the demonstration.
Okay, I will do my best. Thank you so much for your patience, dear panelists and the audience as well. Is it visible?
Not yet on our end. Perhaps we should just give it one more try, clicking the share screen in Zoom.
Yes, because it is already an application and it is downloaded. That's why there is difficulty in. Then if it doesn't work this time, I will move to share with you a modest now, Stuart? No?
No, I'm not seeing it. I don't know if any of our panelists are seeing it.
Thank you. So I will move to share with you and all the global citizens the certificates I prepared beforehand as participation in the training. Entitled, this is to certify that all the global citizens have successfully participated in the fight against COVID. And thank you so much. Thank
you. Thank you, Amina. And if possible, we would love the link to be able to share your resource with others. So,
thank you. My pleasure.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Yes. So thank you all very, very much. Merci infiniment, shukran. All of our presenters and also our many attendees for being with us today. What I would like to do is, this is the last webinar in the series, is just to take a moment to recognize 3 behind-the-scenes heroes on these webinars. One is Tanya Pinkerton, who has been tirelessly coordinating. There we are. So Tanya, on behalf of this panel and all panels before it, for all of our participants, thank you so very much for all of your hard work to bring us all together. These would not be possible without you. So thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. It's been my pleasure.
And this thank you is being recorded. So whenever you're feeling sad, you can just go back and watch it. And I would also like to take a moment to recognize Caitlin Jorgensen, who has been our tireless tech genius, who has helped us with all of our webinars. And again, thank you so much, Caitlin, for all of your hard work and behind the scenes effort to make these possible. And last, but certainly not least, the person who makes this webinar work in multiple languages at the same time. Thank you so much to Rashid and all of the translation staff who have helped us be able to communicate so clearly and so well across space, time, and cultures. Thank you so much for your participation in these webinars.
Thank you, Stewart.
You are very welcome. Finally, again, warmest thanks to all of our friends in Morocco and around the world who have participated in these webinars. It has been my great pleasure and honor to be speaking with all of you. And it is my great hope that sometime in the near future, we might all gather for some mint tea and couscous in Morocco and enjoy being together in person, where Mohammed will be providing a private performance for all of us. So, so thank you. I have some personal, thank you. I have some personal favorites that I would like you to perform. So again, thank you all from the bottom of our hearts for your participation. Thank you to all of the people who have made this possible, and we look forward to meeting everyone again, either digitally or in person very soon. Thank you, and be well.